fast, efficient and affordable business-grade hosting solutions, domain registration, SSL certificates and more. We also monitor and provide website security and update services, website builds, email hosting amongst other sensational products. If you have a question about your web page or your presence on the internet in general, no job is too big or too small. Visit our website today, or better yet, contact us at blueoceanwebhosting.com.au and leave your website issues to us.
Big ones, little ones, fiddly ones, powerful ones. The ones for the car or the truck, caravan, boat, mobility scooter, solar system. In fact, for any kind of battery, go straight to Battery Central Ipswich. They'll even help you when you know what you need to power but have no idea what'll do the job. Battery Central Ipswich, 280 Brisbane Street, West Ipswich, in the yellow building. Expert advice, better batteries, best prices every day. That's Battery Central Ipswich.
Welcome to episode 775 of the Aussie Tech Heads. I'm Jason Oakley and this is Will Tompkinson. Hey Will.
Hey mate, it's been a while.
We were going to do a show last week. Bloody Ubuntu screwed up. Took me 2 hours to find out they'd had a change in the kernel that wouldn't let the virtual camera for OBS run until I patched it with a small script. But it took 2 hours to find that was a problem, and apparently it's been known for a little while, but they haven't patched it yet. So.
It's the only problem on an Intel system, apparently. Didn't affect AMD systems.
No, because you're doing the same thing. You're like, look, it's got virtual camera. I'm like, no, it doesn't. Yes, it bloody does. It's right there. Look, here's a screenshot. There's no virtual camera. I reinstalled it. I reinstalled OBS 5 different ways.
That's what I mean. There was an Intel only issue. Actually, several of the last problems you've been having, I think, are
your kernel is a couple of versions behind mine as well. So you might have come across it.
That's true too. Which is strange because
you update the same as I do.
Well, it updates on the same pattern, but the AMD kernel is generally considered to be more efficient than the Intel one, yet it's an older version. So, I guess having an older version in some regards eliminates problems like that.
Yeah.
So,
wouldn't it? But it's not like something that you would. Why does it affect OBS, virtual camera, nothing else? And
because they're using that.
Googling.
They're probably using that one line of redundant code that's been there for 14 years and they just never got around to removing, and they finally removed that one line of code.
Now it's screwed everybody up.
Yeah. Much like Windows.
Yes.
What do you mean you want the most recent drivers? No, you want these drivers from 1994. They'll work better.
Yeah, so they overwrite with the Microsoft one instead of your AMD one.
Yeah.
Just what you don't want.
Yeah, I know.
Besides that, how have you been? How have you been?
Shit house, honestly. But, you know.
Weather yet?
We've had, the last 2 days have been 26, 28, something like that. Yeah.
We've had like lows of 10, I think, and highs of about 16 at the most.
We've had, so it really, when it gets to you, like we had, last week we had a low of like 2 and 3 and 4, and then the days were like 22, 23, 24. Like, yeah, it's, the swings are getting, everyone's getting sick just because of the mass. It's like walking in and out of a fridge all the time, you know. Yeah. And then the last couple of days have been super foggy, so as soon as you know it's foggy, it's going to be hot. So it's
humid.
So yeah.
It's not the heat, it's the humidity.
It really is. Like it was 20, whatever it was, 26 or something, but it was, I think it was 92 or 94% humidity.
Yeah.
You know, which is that's what does it.
Yeah.
So, but
I had been working on a Rogue for the VZ like 6 months ago or something, and I went hardcore at it for a while, and then I was like, I wonder if anybody even would play Rogue on a VZ. Maybe I should try something else. So I had several weeks of indecisibility. Is that a word?
It is now.
Indecisiveness. And decided to go and make Defender. So I've got it all scrolling super fast down the bottom, little radar up the top scrolls along, and the spaceship goes this way and that way and has exhaust and stuff. And one of the guys on the Facebook group, there's a guy, Ben Venn, who's known, I think he's from New South Wales. He's known all over the world as making these great cartridge things for Game Boys and all different handheld machines and old machines and VZ, and I got a cartridge there from him a year or so ago that lets you put a SD card in it, and you can put your VZ games on there and then plug it into a real VZ and it loads up, and also gives 128k of RAM, which you're never going to use on a VZ because nobody does bank switching for anything, and quickly loads your games in and stuff. And just recently it was saying, well, I did a run of those a couple of years ago. Does anybody want to, who didn't buy it then or would like a newer version? And we're like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. What else are you going to do? He's like, well, maybe I'll do it, make it so that you can plug in NES style joypad, and it'll remap it to VZ style code so that you could play VZ games using, because these joysticks are getting harder and harder to find. And of course, when one does appear for $1 billion, @RE rare, super rare VZ joystick. There was a box, VZ200 box with the foam insert, no electronics, no computer, no nothing, just the box, $40 on eBay, rare. So he's like, well, maybe you could use Nintendo joypad things from the NES and plug it in, and they're pretty standard now, and he'll just poll it and then send out the codes to the actual VZ so it'll think there's real joysticks plugged in. So he's done that. So he said, I'll just do a quick run of 40 of them, or 40 or 50 of them, and they sold out in 2 or 3 days. And then there's people going, but I didn't check Facebook in those 2 days I was away. I missed out. He's like, oh, well, I'll just do another run of 20. Anybody else wants one, get in now, and don't just say on Facebook, I would like one, please, because that's not buying one from me. I need to know in the shop that I can get your money before I'm going to order this, because he has to get all the specs and then send it off to places to make the cartridge case and then make the motherboard, the PCB, and then put the chips and everything in. So he has to have the money first, so he's gone and done that. So hopefully we'll be able to do that, and then I'll be able to test out Defender on the VZ once I get going. But it works really well in the emulator. And then this guy goes, oh, so once this Ben Venn's new thing comes out, Jason's already promised Rogue that's going to, obviously it's rumoured to take up 128k of RAM. And I was like, well, I stopped making the roguelike because I didn't think there would be much use, and I thought it was going to be a lot of trouble to program if not many people are going to play it. Then a couple of guys are like, oh my god, I love Rogue, I would love it so much to be able to play it on the VZ, please don't stop. I was like, well, I already started on another game. Okay, you heard it here first, everyone. Jason's going to have 2 games coming out for the VZ. Hang on. You might get one if you're really lucky and I stop being lazy, but I don't think you're going to get 2 this year. You might get a second one next year, but I've also been itching on and off for a while to maybe do one for... I'm trying to decide if I'm going to do it for Game Boy and Game Boy Color, which is easy to do, just one program that'll run on both, or just go for Game Boy Advance. But I don't know which one's more popular for people who would like to download and play a new Game Boy game Obviously,
Probably
with the
Game Boy Advance. Yeah, Advance was
what's more popular for retro people now. What are they going to most likely be downloading?
probably Advance because it has a bigger back catalogue.
And it runs all the others anyway.
The Game Boy Color really didn't have that much unique that the Game Boy didn't have. There was a few things, but they were effectively the same. But the Game Boy Advance, yeah, it had a lot more stuff brought out on it, and it's a much more powerful machine and can do a lot more anyway.
Billions of colours and real digital sound and everything, but
I'm pretty sure there's a Game Boy emulator on it as well.
yeah. The Advance will play all the Game Boy and Game Boy Color stuff.
So if you there's kind of no point having a Game Boy Color, and an Advance. I mean, you might have them, but realistically, you're only going to use the Advanced.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if I made it for Game Boy Color, it'd run on all three. So I don't know.
That's true too. That's true too.
But if you want it to be sound and look really amazing, then and easier to code, because I could do the whole thing in C, whereas on those Game Boy and Game Boy Color, you really want to do it in assembly if you can. If you can get it stuff to go in C if you try, but really it's not made for that. It'll run a bit slow in C because it's not efficient. But the Game Boy Advance doesn't care because it's got powerhouse CPU in there and tons of jiggly bytes of RAMs and stuff. Well, megabytes maybe. Kilobytes?
Yeah, I was going to say megabytes. What was the Game Boy CPU was like?
The original Game Boy one was like a Z80, like the VZ,
Z80,
at 4 kilohertz, 4 megahertz, and but it was effectively 1 megahertz because all of the commands would take 4 cycles.
There's a chip similar to the Intel 8080.
Yeah, sort of a cross between the Z80 and the 8080, but it had some of the stuff missing from the Z80.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird. I guess power efficiency was their biggest thing back then. Trying to make it as it was. It had 8 bloody AA batteries in the thing that lasted like 45 minutes or something.
Yep. But that was great back in those days. You could Pokemon all day and night.
As long as you're near a power point.
And had a little plug-in light.
Yeah, the one over the top, so you
could
could
on
see
the
it.
screen, and then a magnifier so you could actually see the screen and all the accessories, external. Dual
Actually, if you want to see a whole heap of accessories and all the different, both genuine and aftermarket options, Ashens on YouTube, he did a actual Game Boy accessory lineup, and it had all the different options, everything from clip-on stuff to these big, like, external, like a mech suit for the thing. You'd put it in and you'd fold it up and close it up and twist it.
Yeah. They're pretty mad.
It held like 6 or 8 C cell batteries or D cell batteries, and yeah, it was insane.
Lasted half an hour.
Because you had the light and the powered speakers, and you had the stereo mono speakers, and that was the weirdest part. It had a mono speaker on the front, but it had full stereo sound on all the games, but you only heard if you put earphones in.
Yeah.
That was just bizarre. That was like, you could have freed up more memory in the cartridge by having mono sound and,
Yeah. Stuff.
It was weird. But speaking of games, mine's not quite as exciting. I bought a thing, not I made a thing, but
What'd you get?
I bought, well, I can't pronounce the company name because it's Polish, but they call them Eltec, and they're dance pads. So, if anyone, wow, words are hard tonight. If anybody's ever been to an arcade and seen like Dance Dance Revolution, and they got the dance mats, they basically do a version of that for home.
Didn't you used to kill that because you worked in the arcade and did Dance every day?
I used to love it all the time. It was the best way to get fit, which is why I've bought this again, because I've gone on my, I've adjusted my dietary intake, so I've got that under control, but I still need the exercise, and I have trouble with exercising because I find it boring. But I used to love doing this so much that because of that, I think I'll have no trouble at all. I can spend hours literally doing this.
Do you just plug it into your PC or?
So there's a few options. It comes with Stepmania, which is the open source variant of Dance Dance, and so it can be as simple as plugging into your PC. You can make it. It's very low system specs. Like it'll run on a like an old Asus PC or something. Like it has a very low system process. The Dance Dance Revolution cabinets actually ran on PlayStation 2s.
Wow! What?
Yeah, they had PlayStation 2s in the cabinet, and they had a seat at the Konami.
Nuts.
CDs that, went into the PlayStation and they played them, and then when they bought out 3rd gen, 4th gen, they just changed the CDs.
Oh, nice. But if you're jumping all the time, does it make the CD jump and skip?
No, well, that's why the cabinet, and took me a while to figure it out, but the dance mats were always isolated. They were always separated from the cabinet. They only had the cable chain going to it, and I could never figure out why, but after a while I figured out that's why they had separate. They had a separate pad from the cabinet.
You just go jogging with your Sony portable CD player and skip the songs.
They had a 10-second buffer, but that didn't help when you bounced around for 12 seconds.
No.
But so I got one of those. It's basically USB port, plugs into USB. I will probably set up a DDR rig just because I like the idea of having it there, so set up permanently where you haven't got to set up.
Next week's show, you're going to be jumping on the spot while you're reading out the news.
No, unfortunately, coming from Poland, it's going to take. I think they said like 6 weeks or something to get here. So, but it's all part of. It's all part of related to obviously physical fitness is one thing, but then you got the mental health side of it, which nobody mentions, and that's been taking a toll lately with everything that's been going on at work and the stress and drama and insurance and all that crap as well. So not only have I physically not been feeling well, but I haven't mentally been with it very well either. So this is a path back to getting both of them aligned again. But neither of them need to be perfect.
You just want to challenge them, I think.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. We can do it together because I got him. He's got one of those $10 foam mats, which is fine for him, but for me, they last about 12 seconds and they go, nah. But I kind of want to get, rebalanced again mentally and stop with the anxiety and all the fun stuff that goes with that and the stress and the just constantly feeling sick just from stress.
Yeah,
the novelty wears off after a while.
Working on the same thing for the same reason.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not cool for blokes to talk about it, but that's part of the problem. There's some reason has this stigma attached to it that is causing more problems than it's solving. And it's something that does need to be spoken about. And in all honesty, it's something I'm thinking about doing a podcast about. Yep. I'm trying to figure out if it'd be feasible, but if I get enough interest, I might look at doing it and treating it from just a layman's point of view rather than, you have all the medical advice in the world, but it doesn't help you in the real world because 90% of it doesn't translate to day-to-day life.
Email Will at Aussie Tech Heads if you're interested.
Yeah, get a hold of me, or you can catch me on numerous platforms on Facebook, whatever. But so it's all kind of hey.
Pop in the shop, buy a battery, have a chat.
Yeah. That'll help my mental health, I tell you.
Buy 50 batteries, that'll really help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's all part of the whole new sort of thing. I'm trying to embrace that. So, but that's all. Yeah. So the long story short, so that's why I bought this. Try and kill two birds with one stone. One is obviously spend more time with Cam because I working 6 days a week. You just unfortunately they grow up so fast. You don't get to spend as much time. But I figure at least this way I can be exercising and be productively being a father at the same time. So
that's exactly why I got into Minecraft in the first place. So Sienna and I would have something to play together, even if we were just connected through Discord or whatever we had back in those days, Mumble or TeamSpeak or whatever. And we could chat and we could play games and she could come up with games inside the game and adventures and stuff we go on, and just have a lot of fun together with your kid.
And Cam does that. Like while I'm at work on Saturday or whatever, he'll jump on to the Minecraft servers list and he'll look through it and he'll find something that's got mini games or he'll find something that's got something. And when I get home, we'll jump on for a couple of hours and play this server that he's found and have some fun. So yeah, it's
what I found today, Dad.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's I've only played on that 6-7 years ago. Yeah.
Is that still around? I mean, that's a fantastic new server you found.
It's so funny when I log in to these servers that I haven't been on in 8-9 years or however long it's been. I log into them and I pop up and I'm still inside my house and I'm in a. It's like,
welcome
wow,
back,
really?
Mr. Tompkinson.
So, well, apparently I've been on this server at some point. So, but yeah, so that's all part of the grand plan. So now it just has to happen.
Sounds good. After all that, should we do some news?
I'm exhausted now. I'm going to go to bed.
Usually we get a out of you, but we got something positive this time.
Yeah, don't worry. The rant, no, maybe. See the stories go.
Aussie Broadband says its fibre rollout to NBN points of interconnect is 90% complete. In a fourth quarter update, the company said it now has 105 NBN POIs connected, either to its own fibre in metropolitan locations or to 100 gigabit wavelengths provided by Telstra in regional areas. Most of the remaining POIs will be connected this quarter, he said, which will show up in far reduced backhaul charges when the company reports its full year results at the end of August. The company is also continuing to expand a number of buildings it has fibre in, which Managing Director Philip Britt said will present growth opportunities for the company's business segment. Aussie Broadband reported fourth quarter growth across all its broadband business segments, with total broadband services up 7% in the quarter to nearly 585,000 and 46% growth year on year. Residential services grew by 28% to 465,000, business grew 68% to 59,500, including Aussie Broadband's recent acquisition of Over the Wire, and wholesale services were up 16% in the quarter to nearly 60,000. The combination of subscriber growth and cost savings mean Aussie Broadband expects to report a full year EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation and amortization of 39 million, which Britt says is the high end of previous guidance. Britt said the subscriber growth is particularly satisfying given the residential broadband is ultimately a churn market these days. Near or at cost offers are definitely running hot and will continue to run hot into the first quarter. You get your offer hoppers that move around these different deals, he added, noting that Aussie Broadband is questioning whether it wants to take part in that kind of competition in the future. Brett also offered a surprising insight into the update. Australia's housing affordability crisis is starting to impact the broadband business. Well, if you can't afford to buy a house, then...
Well, and it's not only that. A lot of they're cramming in huge amounts of housing into tiny areas, and there just is no broadband there.
Yeah, and then you have to get permission to have it installed as well.
Well, that's what
turning on
a
phone line in a lot of cases, is it? You have to have a whole installation.
Well, especially if it's body corporate.
Yeah.
But a lot of the estates that are going in, they're just not. They're putting them that fast. They're not provisioning in time. Like they might technically have fibre to the node or fibre to the premises or whatever, but they don't actually have it. It's not available, even though it's the system's in place for it. Because what people somehow forget is that it's all fine and dandy for you to put, you roll out street by street by street, you're adding 20, 30, 40 people at a time. It's not a big deal. An estate can go up in 3 months, so it's got 10, 15, 20,000 people in it. The back end of that infrastructure just can't handle that influx. Like the local exchange physically can't be upgraded fast enough to handle that amount of people.
One, right?
Well, yeah, and so they're running into that problem here now. But so they thought, we'll solve that problem. We'll put up a new tower and we'll let everybody have 4G, and they can use 4G for the NBN, which is the fine, except the new tower still trunks into the exchange.
Yep.
That's already overcrowded and not working and not allowing anybody to have internet anyway.
And you said it's not fibre from the exchange back into the main one.
No, and here's the dumb part: the new tower they put up, that they just spent ridiculous amounts of money putting up 3 times because it got struck by lightning before it got put up the last twice. It completely fried all it. They literally
haven't got the hint yet, have they? Look.
The funny part is it's what, 10 meters maybe from the existing tower.
All right.
It's just got more transmitters and stuff on it. And so the first time they stood it up, it got hit by lightning before it had anything on it. The second time they put it back up, and then they rigged it and they put all the transmitters and all the antennas and everything, got hit by lightning again. And then the third time after they replaced all those because they got hit by lightning, and they'd run all the lines to it, and they'd actually hooked up to the exchange and just started broadcasting, and got hit by lightning again. And it's 10 meters away from the one that's been there for like 30 years. So
Never been hit.
never been hit. But yeah, so they've tunneled all this back into the local exchange, which already can't cope with the internet traffic it has.
Yep.
So they've funneled another 10,000 lines or whatever it is through 4G back into it. And they wonder why people, you can kind of get, I mean, you can get 4G, you can't do anything with it. Like, you go to Walloon and you get full signal in 4G, but you try and even check Gmail or something, and it takes you half an hour just to load the page. You know, so
Problem solved. Mixed technology. Thank you, Libs.
yeah. Well, Aussie Broadband obviously is different. They when they're talking about a lot of their setups, they're talking about they own the fibre. They've bought either dark fibre or they've laid fibre.
Yep.
That's predominantly Victoria and lower, I believe, like southern end of New South Wales. But the point's still valid everywhere they roll out. They don't roll out, and they don't oversell their allocation. They always undersell it so that they do have overhead there for growth. You know, because if you've got a street with 100 people in it, and let's say your share of that, you get 20 people. Well, okay, you've been allocated 100. You know, you've been allocated enough for that street, but you've only got 20 people there. You only sell your 20 allocations, and you keep the other. Let's say they expect you to have 50 people, so you keep the other 30 allocations. You don't add them to another high density area, because if another 10 or 15 people move in or move out and change providers, then suddenly you don't have the allocation in that street. It goes back to the old days where when every house in the street was technically allocated 2 phone lines. Yep. So if you had 100 houses in the street, there was 200 lines laid. And even though most houses, well, initially a lot of them didn't even have one, but then moved on, a lot of them had one, and then some of the ones who had fax machines or alarm systems got the second line in, but ultimately there was always spare lines. And then comes along the days of ISDN, where you needed at least 2 lines to have ISDN functioning properly. I can't remember. I think you could run 6 lines or something, but you needed at least 2, plus 1 for your phone line. So you needed 3 lines. So then suddenly every business in that street wants 3 lines instead of the 2 that they've already maxed out because they've already got 2 phone lines in there anyway. Yep. So now they're trying to mix ISDN and voice, and they need 3 or 4 lines per premises, and they've only got 2 that they're already using anyway. That's exactly the same problem.
All the houses come along with ADSL, and then they get stuck
same
with the
thing.
rim. They can't get past the rim because of that.
And it's literally exactly the same problem, just 30 years later. Like, nothing's changed. It's still the same problem. The demand outweighs supply every time, and it doesn't matter what workarounds you put in place. If you don't have enough physical infrastructure there, it will just stop working. So
it's like those coverage maps that you always saw for. Technically, yes, there is coverage there, and you might get full signal if you're lucky. Doesn't mean that you can make a phone call, but the coverage is there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like they're not wrong because you get bars on the phone. You can't necessarily do anything with it, but you get bars on the phone. But even that goes back. I remember back
The
in.
bars don't mean anything because remember when Apple started putting in realistic bars and AT&T sued them or told them off or whatever and said,
Yeah.
no, you gotta just always say there's 5 bars when even if there's only one, we don't want the truth.
Yeah.
So they had to reprogram the software.
I remember back in, must have been 90, 98, 99, because that was I had the Motorola Jazz and the Philips Savvy, so it was sort of back in that era. It was the Nokia 5110 era. And I was where I was in my apartment at the time. It was kind of backed onto a factory, and they had a big, like, 4-story high brick wall. And every provider map I looked at the time told me I had signal there. Yep. But the thing is, the tower in Swan Hill, there was only one tower, and there was a shared tower, and it was on the other side from where I was. Well, actually, there was 2 towers, one at the other end of town, but that was too far away. My closest tower was on the other side of that building because I was literally backed onto that building. I had no signal. Yeah. I would have to walk out the door and go down another 2 houses before I actually had signal. Because
what are all these voicemails all of a sudden?
Yeah. Because you just physically couldn't get signal there because it wasn't possible with the way the building was. Didn't matter what network, they're all exactly the same. And then, then we had obviously had the same problem with TV signals and everything. Like we had our antenna it looked like a big shortwave antenna. It was about like 60 or 70 meters high on a big steel frame. Jeez. And just to go up above this building to get signal, but even things like Austar satellite back in the day. The satellite dish was put, I think it was on the property where the building was, on the backside of the building that had an empty area. I think there was about 20 satellite dishes there that were tied into all the houses around this building because there was no other. You couldn't put them anywhere to get a signal on the roof of the house, so they put them all in this flat area at the back. Yep. And just ran coax cable up to all the houses to get the signal they needed. Wow. And they had like 4 LNBs on the dishes, so each dish did like four outputs. But yeah, it was just. But yeah, it was a case of technically yes, and all the providers would sell me a phone plan because I technically had signal there. Yep. I just actually couldn't do anything with it. No. And that was when we discovered the what did we used to make? A wok, a Pringles can, a wok and a Pringles can used to be our repeater. We actually figured out that we could angle it from the park across the other side of the road. We could mount it in the tree, and we could angle a wok with the Pringles can as a center and beam it at the house, and it would actually put phone signal into the house.
Oh, nice.
I don't know. It was probably completely screwing up, the local aviation network or something, but it was working perfect. We had phone signal. That was the important part. So, speaking of limits, Zoom apparently has limits now. So, for years, for what? The last 3, 4, 5 years? However long Zoom's been around, we've been using their free plan. Through Aussie Tech Heads, obviously has a paid plan, but personally, we've been using their free plan. And it's always been 2 people has always been effectively, I think it was limited to 2 hours or 3 hours or something, but a basically unlimited plan for 2 people. Well, as of July 15th, they've now made it that the free plan is a 40-minute plan, even if you only got 2 people. You now have to buy a plan. So that's a very Skype thing to do. They started doing that. They started making it so that they'd nerf their free plans so that they wouldn't work. They'd shorten the time limit, had it standard def only instead of high def, just so people would pay.
Squeeze the dollars.
Now Zoom's doing it too, which is, I get it for business and for 3, 4, 5, 10 people. Yeah, okay, fine. But when it's one-on-one, relatively speaking, the bandwidth that those people are using compared to the corporates that are putting 400 or 500 people on a call at the same time, it's so negligible.
40 minutes should be enough for anybody.
Yeah.
What else are you going to talk about?
I mean, if I put a 2-hour limit on it, that's fine. You don't need more than 2 hours. Like, a 2-hour limit's going to be enough to, and if you after 2 hours, you can always rejoin. But for why 40 minutes? At least make it an hour. Like, make it a number that's, I called them at 10 to 5, so by 10 to 6 we'll have to reconnect. Yep. At 40 minutes, you're like, I called them at 7:35, and when am I going to run out of time? So yeah, I'm not real happy about it. And then just to top it off, they don't, whilst they do technically have a personal plan and a business plan, they're basically exactly the same thing. They're the same price and same costing for the low-end plan anyway. And they treat the business application, the personal application, as a business application. So
you have to tell them how many members you've got in your company.
Yeah, how big's your staff? They wonder how big your staff is, all sorts of things.
That's rude, isn't it?
And it reminds me very much of I can't think. TeamViewer. They have a personal account, but they don't really, because they know that nobody actually uses it for personal stuff. So their personal account, their paid personal account, still asks you for your ABN and how many employees you've got, because they know full well that it's not going to be used for personal. So, but yeah, so look, there are a couple of other options that are around. There's not much in the free realm anymore. Google Hangouts or whatever the heck it is gone away, and they've got they've got their Google Meet. Actually, I don't know about the personal one. I know the business one's like $5 a month or something. I don't know what I haven't tried their new one. Actually, we should try that one day just for curiosity. Yeah. I mean, because Hangout, when it came out at the time, was the best. It was great. Uvu was amazing, but then Uvu died. Some reason it disappeared. I don't know what that was about, but it was actually really good. Then Hangouts was actually really good. It's still, at the time, you still had Skype and stuff, and it was fast period of those. And Zoom came out and did it right, but unfortunately, they're getting. I think they're getting a bit greedy, honestly.
I mean, they got so much influx of money when COVID hit.
Yeah,
it's not like they're desperate for more to make the shareholders. It's just greed.
No, and they do so much more now than just, like, when the Zoom started, it was just Zoom. But now they've got full on like education sectors and finance sectors and government sectors and healthcare sectors, and like they've got all these platforms, these separate platforms for all different things. They've got okay, so and Ring, the Ring doorbell, they've gone the complete opposite way. They started off as just a doorbell. Now they've got a full communications platform as well, where they do something similar to Zoom, and they've got all this sort of analytics, and they've got all these different formats and rooms, and Zoom's kind of gone the opposite way. It started off as a communications platform, and they now have the same monitoring and security platform as well that Ring's got. So they've kind of, one's gone this way, one's gone this way.
I'll meet you halfway in the middle.
So yeah, look, don't get me wrong. I love this. I love the software. It works. I don't think we've ever had a problem, as far as I can recall. No. At least it was actually a Zoom problem. We've had. There's been some weird, stupid compatibility issues where one day Firefox won't work, and then it does the next day, and Chrome won't work one day, and then Opera won't work. Like, it just, there's been some weird, whether that's just been bug updates in the browsers or whatever. But in terms of stability and quality issues, I really don't think we've ever had a problem with Zoom in that regard. Not that I can recall, anyway. At least nothing that we couldn't deal with. Yeah. But yeah, I think what was the yearly package? $280 or something was their minimum.
$209 a year.
Yeah, $209 a year. Well, that's if you pay it yearly.
Yep.
Add 20% if you're paying it monthly, so that's another $45. So 250 odd bucks a year, for a personal account. That's a bit rich.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Look, if they threw in a TeamViewer style remote control,
Yep.
yeah, I could justify that. But I mean, having said that, yeah, exactly. You're either going to buy it or you're not, aren't you? I mean, if you want it, you want it. If you don't. But I think
Why is there not more choices? Why are not more people doing the Zoom thing?
Look, it is hard having a reliable codec that is lightweight enough to function across multiple platforms. That the server also, don't forget, when you've got 100 people on a Zoom call, the server also has to encode and re-encode and every single one of those calls to send it to everyone else. So you've got to have a very, very efficient codec, and a hell of a lot of internal bandwidth. You don't necessarily, me and you don't need a lot of bandwidth, but their internal servers and their internal communication systems need a mass amount of bandwidth. They wouldn't even need much in terms of file store. I mean, yeah, I know that you can do Zoom record and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, I think I remember a 2-hour conversation recorded on Zoom was 145 meg or something. Like, it's nothing. Like, it's a really, really efficient codec, so it packs it in really well, but they don't. It's not like a search engine where they're constantly just churning hundreds and hundreds of petabytes of data. You know, they're not really doing that. Most of their stuff is in and out of memory, so they don't need super powerful, super massive data storage centers. They don't need super powerful computers. They don't need a lot of memory bandwidth and a lot of data throughput. So I'd imagine, okay, they do have a lot of scaling costs there, but that's a lot. You think how many users, how many millions of people are using Zoom on a daily basis. And then you got the corporates who are paying whatever it was, $700 a month for, I think it was 300 seats, and then it's X amount of seats after that. Yeah. So you got a big corporation that's got, you think of, not even a big corporation, some of the larger companies that have several hundred employees, they've got to be funneling in thousands of dollars a month to use it. Yep. So yeah, look, I think that they might be a little greedy there, but look, if it supports their infrastructure, if they don't just do what Zoom did and do what Skype does, throw it in the bank and then sell the company 12 months later and have not actually touched anything, if they actually throw it in infrastructure and support and make the program better, then yeah, okay, I'm not going to complain too much. I still think I'd like to see an hour on a free license. I think if it was an hour, I think that would be a really good middle ground because most businesses still won't use it in an hour because it's still not long enough to have a staff meeting, because your staff meeting usually goes for the best part of an hour, and you've got to allow half an hour before the meeting for people to join, and so
more than 2 people as well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's the kind of thing that annoys me. That that used to be free for 2 people, and like now it's not. You can have one host is free. Oh no, actually no, change it. You can't even do that. I'm just reading it now. Free licenses on free paid accounts. Meeting ends after 40 minutes, active or at idle. So one host and no participants, it'll time out after 40 minutes. So if you're like waiting in the waiting room or whatever, but you haven't brought anybody in, it'll time out. One host and one participant will time out, or 0 hosts and 1 participants. So even if you're waiting for a call before the host gets there, it'll still time out. Which is a bit rude. So, yeah. But yeah, no, we'll see. I'll be curious because that's relatively new change. It's only a month or so ago they did that. So, or not even 3 weeks ago they did that. So, be interesting to see in a couple of months' time. Come back and check on that and see how it's affected their ranking in terms of personal use. So we'll see.
System 76 quietly released their latest Pop! OS Linux 2204 distribution based on Ubuntu 2204 LTS as a tech preview for Raspberry Pi 4 devices and is now available for download for early adopters. Pop! OS Linux 2204 LTS was released in late April 22, shortly after the release of Ubuntu 2204 LTS Jammy Jellyfish, on which system... Yummy! On which System 76's in-house built new Linux distribution is based, but featuring a GNOME-based desktop environment called Cosmic. While it inherits the base packages of Ubuntu 2204 LTS, Pop! OS Linux 2204 LTS ships with Linux kernel 5.16 instead of the long-term supported 5.15 LTS kernel series used upstream, as well as a new System 76 scheduler that optimizes the performance of the distribution by directing resources to the window in focus for a much smoother experience. Other new features in Pop! OS Linux 2204 LTS include Pipewire as a default audio processing system, support for scheduling automatic updates for Debian, Flatpak and Nix packages in the OS upgrade and recovery panel in the settings, an improved PopShop software manager, the ability to set dark mode and light mode backgrounds from the background panel in desktop settings, and a new support panel for quick access to various troubleshooting resources from System 76. Until now, Pop! OS Linux 2204 LTS was available for download only for 64-bit AMD, Intel or Nvidia systems, but as of today you can download the Ubuntu-based distribution for Raspberry Pi 4 boards from the official website. The Raspberry Pi flavor is called Pop Pi and is only supported on Raspberry Pi 4 SBCs with 2GB RAM or more, as well as on Raspberry Pi 400 computers. However, System 76 said the Raspberry Pi version of Pop! OS Linux 2204 LTS doesn't come with the LTS, which means it's not supported for as long as the PC version. Still, you want to get a good Linux Ubuntu running on your Raspberry Pi 4 or 400, give it a go.
And I was reading too, they're looking at maybe being able to make it backwards to the 3. They're just seeing if the process is going to handle it, but they can technically do it. Everything's in the kernel to do it. It's just more of a... Exactly. If you wanted to use it as like a MAME emulator or something like that, where you're not really using the GUI part of it much, they reckon it would be fine, but it's going to be the GUI that's going to drag it down a bit. So on that note, obviously Pop! OS I love to bits. As the start of the show, they're not without their faults. We both had a couple of issues with it.
Well, my problem back then, what we were talking about, was from Ubuntu, so it's not the Pop! OS.
That's to say most of the problems
Ubuntu had it.
Most of the problems we've had with it aren't actually Pop issues. The problems I've had with it are related to a known bug in my power management hardware, and if you trigger a certain condition that the system it's the weirdest thing. If you trigger a certain condition, it basically locks the hard drive to read only. It won't write to the hard drive or to the memory. It'll only read from it. It's
the same problem with Windows too, right?
Yeah, I had exactly the same problem with Windows until they figured out what the problem was. It's just, and it's only if you're running a particular configuration of NVI, M2 drives, not even SSDs. It has to be the M2 style. You have to be running 2 of those. You have to be running, I think it's, I can't remember exactly what the conditions are, but there's this list of conditions that it only affects, and I just happen to have the exact, like when I didn't know at the time, but the system I ordered is almost the exact list of conditions. It's so bizarre, but so, and obviously it's very good. It's will suit everybody from a beginner right up to a fairly advanced user, because it has most things just work and just about everything's accessible. There is a couple of
systems which Windows 11 won't.
It really does. Like I've got it, my son's system's beside me, and it's a AMD FX 950. Like it's the last of the FX chips, so it's got to be. Well, it's 2 computers prior. It's the computer. It was my streaming rig 2 computers prior to this one, so it's at least 6 or 7 years old, and except for a couple of games and they're really, really intense games like Wreckfest and a couple of those, it plays almost everything at, at least 30 or 40 frames, which is fine, and it's amazing. It boots up so fast, but there are, it's not like that's the only distro out there. There are a couple others. If you are very new to Linux and want a very out of the box, easy to use, high compatibility, high support, Mint is still rated regularly as one of the most popular for new users. It's not as good once you get advanced because just the nature of the way the program's written. For super advanced users, it tends to be a little too simplistic and you actually have trouble doing some things. But for the average Joe Blow who wants to give it a go, it's it's relatively lightweight distribution, not quite as light as Pop, but fairly lightweight, relatively fast, nice and simple and easy to use. Or there is also a relatively new, it's not super new, it's been out, well, I played with it probably about when I started Pop, so at least Christmas. Maybe not quite that long, but at least 6 months anyway. It's called Nabara. It's based on Fedora, so it's a slightly different. It's a slightly different feel from the get-go because it's actually a different distribution. I don't know quite how to explain it. It's a difference between using like a say. Windows and a Mac, like they both ultimately do the same thing. They just have a lot of different processes. Different, one might use a single click to open something. One might use a double click, or So, and when you're installing files, one might use a different packaging program or things like that. So, but in terms of the way you throw the thumb drive in, you install it, it's going to work exactly the same.
Yeah, is basically Red Hat's free version.
Red Hat from back in the day, yeah. Nabora is rating some of the gaming channels I'm on. They're actually starting to rate it quite well with that. I don't believe it has the split dependencies that of Intel and AMD that Pop has, but it does work on both of them. It has them. It has the one thing Nabara does that most other operating systems don't is it includes a lot of dependencies straight up. So things like all your codec packages like FFmpeg and a lot of your MP3 encoders and a lot of your DivX and a lot of your MP4 encoders and decoders, they're included. They're not. They're open source software, so they're kind of allowed to do it, but because they change revisions so fast, most people won't include them, and you install them, or even if you install OBS, it will generally install the package it needs as part of the install. But they include a lot of these packages as the base install, so you don't have to go, like if you install Audacity, for example, you don't have to go and chase down FFmpeg and what's the other one, Llama something or other, one of the encoders it uses. They're just going to be there waiting for you. Lame coder, yeah. Llama coder, I don't know, something.
Really whips the llama's ass.
And yeah, so it's been really, really well reviewed as well. What's funny, actually, I was reading the changelog just because it's been a while since not that long. I haven't looked at the latest version, but I was looked at the ones prior to that. And they actually started early on, well, like July. They actually were using the Pop OS shell, which I thought was interesting. They're using Genome. So at some point they've switched. They've switched over, but they added Vulkan in July, so that probably helped a fair bit.
Yep.
But yeah, so apparently it's been fairly well received. So there are other options, and in all honesty, it's almost hard to find a bad Linux distribution, or at least in terms of the mainstream distributions, it's hard to find a bad distribution these days, because it is now effectively a mature operating system. It does have enough traction in the general day-to-day public eye that developers are actually putting enough effort in to make it a stable, usable platform now.
Especially thanks to Steam.
Well, yeah. Once Steam decided that they were going to play ball with Linux, it made a huge difference. For many years,
just keep pushing.
Yeah, for many years that was the number one reason most people, myself included, would never use Linux because the game support. Yeah, okay, there was wine and there was hacks and there's like there's DOSBox, but I think they call it DOS Xbox or something like that is the equivalent. So there were ways to do it, but they were hacky and they were buggy and there was never just a smooth, friendly experience. But the last 12 or 18 months, I think since Steam, you're right, but I think even more so since Steam, the Steam Deck, I think, really was the driving factor behind that. Yeah. People realize that minimal hardware can actually be very productive on a Linux system because your overheads are so much lower. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. But yeah. I just thought that you might find that interesting. People want a bit more Linux content, so there's a couple options for you. But so yeah, if you want to try it, then they can all be put onto all the websites have got installation because they're all slightly different, but they all have what they call their live distributions. That goes into a thumb drive. You throw the thumb drive in, you reboot your computer, and it'll boot up off the thumb drive. You can get a feel for what the software has to offer. If you do feel like you want to go further, you can do a non-destructive install, which will basically coexist with the operating system you've currently got. You can either put another hard drive in and install onto that separately, or you can just install on some of the free space you have available. Then you can dual boot for a while to figure out which one you want to use and switch between them and things like that. And once you finally feel comfortable, or you decide you don't like it, you can either take it off or you can switch over to it and go full to it. There is one thing I'll mention that I discovered that I was ripping my hair out for like 2 weeks and it's not mentioned anywhere. There's no documentation on it. It's not under any support documents, whether it's on Steam, whether it's on Pop, whether it's under Linux in general. Nowhere does it mention this. If you are planning on playing games on not just Pop, but any of the platforms where you're using Steam, and you're running them like I have just a 2 terabyte good old fashioned spinning disk hard drive that all my Steam games are on, just because they are so big and take up so much room. That if you're going to do that in Steam under Linux and assign another hard drive that's not your primary drive, you need to make sure that drive is formatted to the same format that your primary drive is. Yeah. So you can't
Linux ext4 or BTRFS, but not.
Yeah. You can't have the FAT32 or the NTFS because even though Linux doesn't have a problem with those, for some reason that's not explained in any of the documentation, at least nothing I could find, it literally will not. It will install the game perfectly fine. It'll install it. It'll do whatever it needs to do. And it's actually not even Steam. It's Proton, because the Linux native games will run. And this is what was really messing with me and I could not figure it out. All the Linux native stuff would run, not a problem. Nothing that required Proton would run. So something in the Proton programming that won't work on an external drive or on another drive if it's not the correct format. And after, I want to say it was a month. It felt like a month. It was a long time. I was looking up something completely unrelated and stumbled across this random post. I think it was Reddit, but it was it was XDA. This random post from not 10 years ago, probably 3 years ago, whenever Proton started to come out. It was like one of the very first versions of Proton they were talking about. And they're like, I noticed this weird thing that if you install it on a drive and it's not the same format, it won't work. And that was it. That's literally all it was. There was no posts, there was no follow-ups, there was no comments, there was no nothing. And that's all this post said. And it was a post from, it must have been like 3 years ago, back when it was version 1 or 2 of Proton. And apparently it's still exactly the same problem, because as soon as admittedly I had to format that drive and get rid of, 50 gig of games or whatever it was I'd put on there. But once I did that, formatted the drive to the Linux, I can't remember which one I used. Probably ETX2. No, I can't remember which one I used. Probably was, yeah. Worked perfect. Reinstalled the games, not a problem. They've all been working perfectly since then. So that's just a random throwaway piece of information that you'll find really handy at some point.
Yeah. And thanks for listening to the Aussie Tech Head Show. We can be found at Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Email us, Will or Warlock, at aussietechheads.com.au, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.